Your attention and time, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Rich Cummins, the president of Columbia Basin College.
Thank you, Dave. And thanks again. I'll just reiterate everybody else's thanks to United Way for putting this on this morning. When you want to solve a huge problem at the systems level, it's important to get all of the system players into a room. And so I applaud United Way for pulling together this conversation. There's a fellow by the name of Adam Kahane who reverses the 1960s slogan, who says that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And he says, actually, if you're not part of the problem, you're not part of the solution. And today we're taking a look at some serious community problems and understanding our own role in those problems so that we can become part of the solution. As Dave said, high school graduation these days, the bar is raised higher and higher. I'm also a 1975 graduate and had pretty much the same track through high school as Dave. And one figure that he didn't include was all the Running Start kids at Columbia Basin College who are taking college-level math. The kids are better prepared, but the headlines are about the lack of preparedness. In my institution, the lack of preparedness is a problem because we're actually dealing with a lot of the poorer students that Dave was illustrating in Jim and their slides. So my story today is going to be a narrative about America and a little bit of our history and a little projection about the future. So this is a picture of my dad. My dad graduated from the war, World War II, in 1945. He was a Navy corpsman, and he re-upped and went back into the Navy, I think, for a total of 10 years. So about 1952, he hit the job market in an America that had no peers. We were dominant in all world markets. We had the best manufacturing in the world, and jobs were wide open for fellows like my dad. Now, a lot of folks had gone through the GI Bill, a lot of men and women who became doctors and lawyers and engineers, but the majority of Americans didn't go on to higher education because jobs were amply ready. So my dad, a typical World War II generation fellow, went to work for Best Foods, and for the next 30 years, from about 52 to 82, he sold peanut butter and corn syrup and new soft fabric starch, and he repeated the skills basically that he learned in the first few months of his employment for 30 years, and then he went on to retire with a pension. And had a nice long retirement and died when he was 86 years old in 2008. A lot of his peers worked in factories, and those individuals again repeated for a career the skills that they learned in the first few months of their employment. That America is gone. The America where people are constantly having to skill up and learn new things is really the norm now for upward mobility in America. I like to say that the community college is an engine for social mobility because the community college, along with the K-12 systems, is really just about the last remaining institution, along with land-grant universities, that allow individuals to skill up and change their lives in a knowledge economy. So that's my dad, and this is the country that the World War II generation built. They built, if you look at this map, which I took from The Economist, an economy that's 25% of world GDP. So this is just a fun little map that takes states of the United States and correlates them directly with the GDP of nation states. So you see that, unfortunately, Washington State is like Greece. But New York has the economic output of Australia, Texas of Russia, Italy and California. California is the 8th largest economy in the world. But in order to keep that GDP, the bar has been raised and the ground has shifted. My father's generation was still part of an America that was a lot like Horatio Alger. And Horatio Alger, of course, was the novelist at the turn of the century, 2 centuries ago now, who wrote the rags to riches novels about scrappy young boys who became successful through their grit. And really, when you take a look at the psychological factors that predict success in life, the ability to delay gratification and develop grit, persistence, determination, grit being the ability to start something, to work all the way through the hard middle and complete it, was what the World War II generation had, and they really did build this country. There are a couple of other elements, though, to success in life, and one, I was just talking to Todd Kleppen beforehand about his program, Ignite, which mentors young people. A cohort group really matters a lot, and you need peers that reflect the right values back to you, but you also need mentoring. And mentoring comes in all kinds of different ways. At a societal level, it comes through policy that provides pathways for people to become successful in life. So these days, to become successful in life, let's take a look at what might be required. And I believe that Horatio today would, at the very least, attend a community college as a post-secondary experience. He may go on to a PhD at the University of Washington or WSU or wherever, but these days, success in life seems to include some sort of post-secondary education. So if we look at a number of studies that have come out in the last several years, we see that between now and 2018, 46 million jobs will be needed in the United States to be filled, and 2/3 of these require some post-secondary education. We're currently at about 40% nationally. So we're a long way from Tipperary in terms of the jobs that we need to maintain the wealth that this nation enjoys. Recent Georgetown studies, again, 67% jobs in Washington will require a college education. And I have some data that I'm going to show in a second that show that the Great Recession unemployment figures show a fault line between those who have some post-secondary education and those who don't. And then finally, middle skills jobs, which are jobs that are something past high school, but less than a 4-year degree, will account for roughly 42% of that 67%. So lots and lots of jobs for people who get an education. So if you look at this data, which came out of a Georgetown study last year, a group that looks at the economics of higher education, headed by a guy by the name of Anthony Carnival, this data is just jaw-dropping, honest to goodness. And it's been peer-reviewed in the national press for over a year now, and the data stand up. So over on the left-hand side of the screen, you see the recession from 2008 to 2010, and then you see us getting into the recovery from 2010 to 12 on the right-hand side of the screen. And as you look at the lines, green, red, and blue, you see that the green are those with bachelor's degrees. Individuals with bachelor's degrees during the Great Recession, even at its height, in the aggregate, lost no jobs. Those with a community college certificate of some sort, an AA degree, it could be an AAS or an AA, lost jobs, but then, and then by 2012, most of those jobs have been recovered. Those with a high school diploma or less lost the most jobs, and and continue to lose jobs. And so one of the dramatic conclusions or inferences that you might draw from this slide is those with a bachelor's degree, there was no recession, and those with a high school degree or less, diploma or less, there was no recovery in the aggregate. There are exceptions to every rule, of course, but in the aggregate, those are the data. If you look at employment growth in the United States over the last couple of decades, you start over on the x-axis there in January of 1989 and run out to February of 12, and then the percentage of employment change is indexed in the 3 lines. Again, the same colors. Green, bachelor's degree and beyond are doing extremely well in the economy. Those with associate's degrees, as I mentioned before, 42%, just happens to be the same figure, but it correlates perfectly. And then those with a high school diploma or less are, again, losing in this economy. The annual job openings by educational level per unemployed worker, again, is also amazing. And what this slide tells you is that if you have a bachelor's degree or higher, there are 5 times as many job openings as there are unemployed persons. In fact, individuals like Bill Gates, of course, routinely complain that they have 2 job openings for every qualified individual applying for the job. So again, Horatio Alger, needs to go to college to get some sort of credential. And then unemployment rates by education. Again, you can see just the data in a different way. And that's pegged to annual income. Again, the more education a person has, the more they tend, in aggregate, to be more productive and to do higher value work that results in higher economic productivity. So here's the thing, and this is correlated exactly with what Dave had to say about how high school graduates are getting smarter and being asked to do more, but which hasn't yet translated to college. So if you look at this is a table that takes, by age cohort, the education levels of United States citizens. So in the age cohort 55 to 64, the United States has 39% of its population with a college, a post-secondary degree of some sort. So we lead the nation in that category. Now, we hear all the time that America's sliding, that all these other countries are beating us. Just read a book last week called The Smartest Kids in the World, and America wasn't mentioned. Finland, South Korea, and Poland were the data sets in this particular book. But if you slide all the way down to where we allegedly have slid at number 10 there in the 25 to 34 cohort, you see that the actual graduation rate or post-secondary degree attainment has actually risen by a percentage point. So it's not that we're sliding, it's that we haven't gotten the story yet. The story is we need to up our game. We need to produce more college graduates to compete in the global economy. Canada has gotten it. Canada leads the world in post-secondary attainment. Their economy is just clicking along. Same with Japan and, as I mentioned, Finland and Korea and those other nations. So it's not so much the decline of the West that you hear about, it's the rise of the rest in terms of the data that I'm looking at least. Now, if you look at college enrollment rates in first fall after graduation, the high school class of 2012, and this is just a slide, and I have another one that kind of shows, again, what Dave and Jim have already spoken about. And poverty is a huge underlying factor. The individuals that we see at the community colleges tend to be individuals who are not wealthy, who have risen from middle and lower middle class circumstances to work their way through college. They're not in general, students whose families have the money to send them off someplace. So, again, you can see that the college level rates fall a lot in line with income levels and also with geographic location. As a community that has a very high poverty rate, especially in Franklin County, and is rural, we're kind of in a double whammy situation when it comes to higher education attainment. This area is notoriously underserved for higher education. When WSU Tri-Cities got 4-year authorization, it was one of the best things that could happen to the Tri-Cities future. And one of the reasons, the biggest reason is because it's going to produce more college graduates who will stay in this particular area of the country. We've relied, as has Microsoft and others, on imports. How long can we sustain economy based on drawing intellectual capital from other parts of the country or the world? The answer is probably not much longer. This is a graphic that just kind of shows you the percentage of all undergraduates in the United States. 14% of them are between the ages of 18 and 22 and living on a residential campus going to school full-time. The vast majority of individuals in higher education in the United States is the non-traditional. So the non-trad is the new trad, basically, right? The person who is trying to skill up, the person who is going at a much slower pace, the person who's living at home, the person in their 30s or 40s, that kind of individual. So when we think about college, unfortunately, I believe we still think in terms of 18 to 22. I hear people say all the time, well, gosh, I didn't go to college. And I look at them and I say, you know, you're 28 years old. What do you mean you didn't go to college? I mean, it's not like the boat is sailed for the rest of your life. It hasn't. You know, I posted on my Facebook page a while back something along the lines of, I can't count the number of people who I've heard say, well, gee whiz, I didn't get married by the time I was 22. I guess I'll be single forever. It just doesn't work that way, especially in the new economy. There's a lot of different ways to get an education, and information technology has opened up a lot of different kind of venues. So that comes down to, okay, well, what about affordable access? And we read all the time in the newspapers about how the cost of education has exceeded, you know, outpaced inflation, you know, 100 times or whatever, that kind of thing. And that's true, but the big story on the cost of education going up is actually the biggest part of it is the retreat of state support. So it's not so much at Columbia Basin College, for example, that we've gotten more expensive in terms of educating individuals. Actually, we cost less than we used to because of budget cuts and other kinds of efficiencies. But our state support has gone down. So that means that we then have to shift the cost of what it takes to get someone through college onto the individual student. That's the real story for higher education in the main. Now, there is a phenomenon of kind of chasing the Carnegie ladder, you know, where the state school tries to be like the research school, and the research school in your state tries to be like Berkeley or Michigan or Ohio State. You know, that certainly happens, but in the main, most of it has to do with a shift in tuition responsibility from taxpayers to students. If you look at what is affordable and what is not affordable, there's lots of ways to put together an affordable education. I just want to pull my hair out when I hear people kind of despair and say, well, I can't go to college, or I can't send my kid to college. Come talk to me, please, if you hear, or send that person to me. I mean, we'll figure it out. There are lots of different ways to put this together. We have 850 students in Running Start right now, and it just makes me so full of joy to know that there are 850 kids, a lot of them from low-income families who are getting 2 years of college for free. And when they get that 2 years put together, then they can go to WSU Tri-Cities and stay at home, and for $25,000 by the end of it, they've got a bachelor's degree. A bachelor's degree does not have to cost $250,000. It does not. So that's just the message that I'm glad I'm in a pulpit, because I feel like a missionary on this. A college degree is necessary, and or some kind of post-secondary experience is necessary, and again, I'm showing you more about the business model. If you look at the blue line, you see that's private. If you look at the red line, those are 4-year public. If you look at the community college, it's 2-year public. And the 4-year and the 2-year have in spite of tax dollar retreat from our systems, have still managed to stay relatively affordable. I think the biggest message that I want to get across is that there's a full spectrum of post-secondary experience that the economy needs. Depends on the individual's interests and talents and proclivities and all that kind of thing. What sort of education will fit that individual? At Columbia Basin College, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4-year programs. We've got the whole range. Maybe it's a 1-year certificate in welding that the person continues to upgrade over the course of a welding career as the individual learns more and more about exotic metals and the chemistry of welding and that stuff. Maybe it's all the way to a PhD that the individual attains and does work in that area. The important thing, I think, is that we want the members of our community to have jobs. Well, you know, to have a utopia would be, in my view, having everybody who wants to work have a job. And these days, to have a meaningful job and a good socially mobile track through America, education is increasingly important, as I hope the data that I presented this morning shows you. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and it's now my pleasure, I think, or no, Loanne comes back up and does her magic. Thank you.